Welcome back. This is Rachel Hernandez, aka Mobile Home Girl of adventuresinmobilehomes.com. Thank you so much for coming back on the podcast and listening to the show. Today, I have a special guest with you, longtime friend, a fellow podcaster and real estate investor. I've got Seth Williams of retipster.com. He's actually a real estate investor and podcaster specializing in land investing, buying and selling land. And today, Seth is going to share with you his experience as a real estate investor buying and selling land, because since land and mobile homes are related, because I get people asking me all the time, how can I buy a piece of land and put a mobile home on it? I decided to bring Seth on the show to talk about his experience buying land, locating land, marketing for land, all the good things today on the Adventures in Mobile Homes podcast. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Seth.
Hey, Rachel. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. I know we've kind of known each other for a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. It's been a minute. Wanted to, just start out with your background, kind of how you got started in real estate, and then go from there.
Yeah, you bet. Well, for me, it's been a while now. I got into real estate in like a serious way in, I guess, 2009 is when I first discovered and started pursuing land specifically. But prior to that, for a couple of years, I had spent a lot of time just spinning my wheels, trying to figure out how to buy houses to rent them out or flip them or do something. And I just struggled for a long time. I could not find deals on anything. Part of my problem was I didn't realize the most efficient, effective ways to go about it. At the time, I was just looking on the MLS. I spent hundreds of hours trying to find deals and nothing ever worked out. And in hindsight, I'm actually kind of lucky it did not work out, because it probably wouldn't have gone that well, honestly. I didn't know what I was doing, and flipping a house and doing all that stuff. It's a lot of stuff to juggle. And land, the beautiful thing about it was it wasn't just the fact that it was land, and land is great because it's a very, very simple type of property to work with for the most part, simpler than houses anyway, because it's just dirt. Nothing's going to get stolen or broken or destroyed. You generally don't have to deal nearly as much with people problems because there's no people living on it. So there was that big advantage, but also learning how to go about finding these deals. At the time, it was by getting a delinquent tax list from the county and sending out direct mail to them. That was kind of the first way that I ever tried, and it was very effective. It's kind of a pain to get the list and work with it, but it's still, when you finally found these people, they were usually very motivated to sell. You could get awesome deals. You'd come across mobile home lots all the time, all day long, for just like crazy cheap prices, like stuff you wouldn't even believe. And part of that was a function of the time. I mean, it was 2009, so everything had just crashed and it was super cheap anyway. But especially when you are dealing with smaller vacant lots that are not massive acreage or anything like that, you can really get amazing deals on these things. Depending on the market, I mean, I've bought lots for $100 before. I've bought them for $500, a few $1,000. $10,000 could get you a very nice property in a lot of places, just the land itself. And what's nice about owning these properties is, I mean, what I always did was my intent was just to flip them, just sell them for a higher price than what I paid for it, usually 2 times or more than that. But an alternative approach, if you actually want passive income from it, is to lease it out to somebody. Or you could also sell it with owner financing. And I want to use that word passive income loosely, because there is some work involved and there are some headaches involved. It's not like truly hands-off passive income you don't think about, but recurring income maybe is a more appropriate word for it. But it's a great way to create cash flow. And for me, it was really special because I didn't have a whole lot of money to work with. I mean, I barely was scraping by. I didn't have tens of thousands of dollars to start buying houses. And I started with $3,000. And this was, again, at a time when I think the business was a bit easier then than it was today in terms of the ability to find deals. I do still think it's a lot easier than houses, but it has gotten more difficult as the business has gotten more popular and there's more people doing this now. But even so, comparatively speaking, it's, when you think of what it takes to start any business, how much money it takes just to open up your doors and be allowed to make money, land, it requires far less than that. And it's far less risky when you're going after the right types of properties with the right strategy. So There you go. I'll
Amazing.
stop talking.
No, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Amazing. I'm interested in your story because I have a lot of people who, they have full-time jobs. They don't know how to do this. Like Rachel, I work, 40 plus hours a week. I've had students who work too much and then they have to go out and hire a team to do the work,
Mhm.
kind of like what I'm doing with the mobile homes, what I'm doing. So I'm interested in your story because I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you started doing this part-time,
Mhm.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah, tell everyone how you did that at the same time while, juggling everything else in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually always been a part-time gig for me. It's never been like the sole thing that I do all week long. But that was another amazing thing about land was that, yeah, I mean, it was for several years really when I was just moonlighting, doing this during my lunch break, doing it after work, doing it on the weekends. And I'd say the first year I started doing it, it was by far the most time consuming just because I didn't know what I was doing. And the first time you go through any process for the first time, there's just a lot of things you have to learn and it just takes longer. But once you've been through the cycle a handful of times, once you've sent mail or whatever your marketing channel of choice is, and then you find deals, you buy them, you list them, you sell them, you get the money back, you do it all over again. Once you've done that at least once, it gets exponentially easier and faster the next time. And there's a lot of ways now that you can automate a lot of things and just eliminate a lot of wasted time. Or even if there are things where inevitably it has to waste somebody's time, it doesn't necessarily have to be your time. Like for example, texting is a emerging marketing channel in the land space. It basically nobody was doing this maybe 3, 4 years ago, like zero. But now there's a fair number of people that are doing it. One of the advantages of texting is it's a lot less expensive than direct mail, and you can also get results a lot faster. Like if what you're doing isn't working, you're going to know that like that day instead of waiting weeks to figure it out. However, one of the downsides is it's a bit more time consuming in that somebody needs to be at the computer, like hitting send, 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 and then like responding to people as they reply. So it consumes somebody's time to do this right. There are people working on trying to make AI chatbots to handle some of this. That'll be interesting to see if that goes anywhere. But one of the downsides is it just takes more time. And for that kind of thing, it's very feasible to hire very inexpensive people to help you out with this to the tune of like, $4 an hour kind of thing, depending on where they are in the world. So there's options like that too. But I do think, especially when you get started, yeah, it's going to be pretty hard, I guess, from the standpoint of you're not going to be able to spend all your time just like watching TV at night. Like you'll need to really be careful with your time and spend a lot of it trying to figure this out until you figure out how to stabilize things.
Exactly, exactly. Now, I've always had mentors for anything I did, even outside of real estate. Now, this is really hard for people they feel like, okay, I'm just getting started. Did you have a mentor when you first got started? And, depending on your answer, how did you learn what you learned? Was it through your mentor or was it through books or was it just kind of on your own?
Yeah.
What was that process like?
Yeah, I did not have a mentor in the land business. I took a course and I was part of a few forums and then started some mastermind groups and, got connected with other educators in this space. I mean, as time has gone on, I've learned a lot of stuff from a lot of different people. But I wouldn't say there was like a mentor that I paid like 10 grand to help me with this or something like that. And I think, if you've got the money for that and if you find the right one, it can certainly shorten your learning curve a bit and just help you see things you wouldn't normally see on your own. But I didn't have that. And I actually know a lot of people who have literally gone from nothing to building a $1 million business without paying anybody anything. And they've learned a lot of it from retipster.com and they never paid me anything. They just kind of took the free stuff, which is totally cool. But I think like if you really have the will to figure this out and if you are kind of like obsessed with mastering it, you can totally do that. That doesn't mean you won't have to work a little harder to do it that way. I mean, if you have the luxury of paying for a mentor or coach, it'll probably help, but I wouldn't say that's a must in order to succeed.
Okay, great. Yeah, y'all. Seth's a really good writer. We both started out as bloggers and he had his podcast before me. I started my podcast in 2020, but check out his, put the information at the end. But I just wanted to, kind of get your perspective because I did have a mentor, and Lonnie Scruggs was one of them. I have so many mentors for mobile homes and also real estate. But let's talk about your overall business right now in terms of, okay, it's 2024 because there's a big difference between when you got started and now. Let's talk about your marketing. What is working right now in 2024 to find motivated seller leads for these pieces of land? And then also if you could let us know about your criteria of their specific areas, specific sizes. How do you determine what you want to pursue, and then also how do you find these seller leads now in 2024?
Yeah, it's a super loaded question. I ask those all the time. I love those questions. So the reason I say it's a loaded question is because in order to know where to look and what to look for and what marketing medium is going to work best for that, you first have to step back and decide, what am I looking for in the first place? Like, do I have $100,000 to spend, or 50, or 5,000, or $1 million? And then like, what kind of investing do I want to do in the land space? It used to be like 5 years ago, there was one very simple model that all of us followed. You would just find a cheap lot and buy it at a super discounted price, maybe 20 to 40% of market value, and then sell it for 2 to 3 times more than what you bought it for. And you can still do that today, but it's a little bit harder because that's the lowest hanging fruit. That's like the most competitive. When everybody gets into this business for the first time, everybody's looking for that because it's fairly straightforward. If you want to sort of have a competitive advantage and potentially make a lot more money with arguably less work and fewer deals, it helps if you're willing to either go after bigger stuff, like stuff that you could buy for maybe $100,000 or more. That'll kind of kick you into a different category that most people aren't playing in. And it's actually not as hard as you might think to do that because there are many different land funders out there now. It's kind of like a little sub-niche industry that has started over the past few years where if you've got a good deal, like you will absolutely find the money for it. And it's not a loan. You get a funder. They basically partner with you on the deal and they put front all the cash to buy the thing. And then when it sells, there's some kind of a split that goes on with the profit from that. So you don't get to keep all the profit, but none of your money went into it in the first place. So like it was pretty risk-free for you. You just had to find the deal. So that's just one big thing to be aware of. If you're ever trying to go after those bigger land deals, just realize you can do it. You do not at all need your own money, and you don't even need a bank loan for it. You just need to prove that it's a good deal to a funder. So there's that. On the other hand, though, if you want to actually, or if you're willing to do some work to like improve the thing or subdivide the thing or get entitlements on it, that kind of kicks you into a different, almost a different business model altogether because when you can buy a property that today is worth $100,000, but after you do your improvements that might cost you $15,000, it'll be worth $250,000. But it does take that work and a little bit of risk because like things might go wrong. They probably won't, but they might. But if you're willing to do that, you can offer 100% of the property's value, maybe even more, because you know it's going to be worth a lot more in the future when you're done. I personally don't go after that kind of thing, or at least I don't offer 100% of market value. I don't know, fundamentally, I just don't really like that. But some people do, and they do really well at it. And the benefit to that is now you can go after deals that like no other land flipper can, because they're looking for those 40% of market value or less deals, which are inherently harder to find these days. So that's, it just, again, it is pretty much a different business model. You're still flipping the land, but like you're doing a lot of work and putting sweat equity into it, or possibly just making changes on paper in terms of like subdividing it. You're not putting in roads or anything, but you are taking a 40-acre parcel and splitting it into maybe 4 10-acre parcels. So on paper, you're literally making more land or more properties that you can then sell for a higher price per acre. So that's another thing to consider. But going back to your original question of like, what is working and like what I'm doing right now to find deals. So the reason I preface all of this with that is because what I'm trying to look for right now is actually parcels that I can convert to semi-truck parking lots. It's a new-ish thing that I've started to do, and it's not super popular or well-known. But given that that's what I'm trying to do, basically creating, it's kind of like a self-storage facility, but with no buildings you just park semi trucks there. But given that that's my objective and that it can create a lot of cash flow once those improvements are made, and the improvements to make aren't necessarily that expensive, it's just like putting down gravel and a fence and gate and that kind of thing. Because I know that's my objective, that impacts where I look for deals and also like how much I'm willing to pay for them and, what the uses of that property have to be. Like I would be looking for industrial land, basically. And normally I would never be looking for industrial land. I'd be looking for like small residential lots. That's what most land flippers do. But when you know what your end goal is, it changes everything about how you go about doing it. So that's like how I go about looking for it. But if I was doing something totally different, I'd probably rely more on ringless voicemail or direct mail or one of these other more common things that most land flippers do.
Yeah, because I mean, I have people, they do want to do the whole mobile home thing, but they want to buy the land and then put the mobile homes on the top of the land. So they're talking about lots. They're talking about, maybe like 10 acres, 5 acres, like finding the land. And I know a lot of the mobile home dealerships in my local area, and they have a hard time finding land too. So for folks out that, in those situations, even mobile home dealerships, if they're listening to this podcast episode, what would your recommendation be for someone who I want to find residential land to put mobile homes on top, or have a piece of land, there's already a mobile home on top, but, expand on that? I know there's direct mail, there's all kinds of things, but, with someone with a limited budget, I mean, what would be your best advice for someone like that? And I know it can vary, so just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a lot of great tools out there right now that make it fairly straightforward to find where those types of properties are, depending on whatever state and county you're looking in. So DataTree, it used to be like the go-to data service that everybody used. There's a lot of other options out there now, or PropStream or Property Radar, any of these things. You can generate lists and pull lists together and sort them based on the properties that are between, say 5 and 10 acres or 1 and 5 acres, whatever range you want. And in DataTree, for example, you can specifically pick out, I want mobile home lots. So the ones that are zoned for that purpose. And you can say, I only want the mobile home lots that don't currently have anything on it. Or say, no, I only want the ones that do have something on it. And just get really hyper specific about what you're looking for. And it's pretty amazing, honestly, like how much easier those data services have made this process of being able to find exactly who you want. And the key is, or one of the keys, I guess, is that when you're sorting a list this way, like your whole intent is to go after properties that are off market. So you're trying to find these property owners who own these properties, but they're not currently listed for sale. And, the problem, I guess, with limiting yourself to properties that are listed for sale is that they kind of know what their property is worth and they're trying to get that price. And just the fact that they've put that out there means that they're trying. What you want to go after are people who are apathetic. They don't care. Maybe they've forgotten about their property. Maybe they bought it 20 years ago and it's not even, they don't even see the thing. It's just out of sight, out of mind. Because those are the people, especially when you get on a call with them and you ask them, so what do you think your property's worth? And they're like, I don't know. I was kind of hoping you could tell me. Like, that's perfect. That means that they haven't even really thought about this and they're kind of going to take whatever you throw at them. I mean, possibly. Doesn't mean they're going to say yes, but when you find somebody who already has a number anchored in their mind and it's pretty close to market value, that's going to be a lot harder to get a great deal on that. Unless they're truly in a tough spot, that's just an uphill battle. So,
yeah, I agree. Most of the deals that I work are pretty much off market. No one really knows about them. I'm working with unfortunately, a mobile home park in my local area is closing. And so I'm working with some residents there. They don't know what to do. They're trying to fight it, but they only have 60 days in Texas to move their home. Otherwise, that's it. And so, I'm trying to work with them, see their options. If they want to locate a lot, locate a piece of land, or, the other thing, I'm wholesaling mobile homes now. I can help them sell their mobile home, right? Mm-hmm. So it's an unfortunate situation, but yeah, I hear you. It's, these kinds of opportunities that are not advertised, that not everyone knows about. And so I just have a question. So with your motivated seller leads, do you invest locally or are you also a virtual investor? Because that's a big thing. I'm a local investor, but I know that's a big thing that's on a lot of people's minds, especially people living in New York, California, where values can be high. What are your thoughts on virtual investing, doing this virtually? I don't know if you do that. So,
Yeah, I do. When I started, I was pretty local. I wouldn't go anywhere outside of my home state in Michigan. I just kind of had this idea that I need to be able to see it before I buy it. And after doing that for, I think it was like 2 or 3 years, after visiting enough properties, and every single time I would go there, it would be, okay, that's interesting. It's a little different than I thought, but still, there it is. Okay, go home now. Like I just sort of realized there's not that much to see that I can't see either through Google Earth or Google Street View, or hiring a local set of boots to drive by the property, paying them $50 to get me some pictures and send it back to me. I mean, if you can get there easily, then definitely that's the best way to do it. But like when you consider the time and the cost and just how much it slows you down to have to do that before you can buy a property, it saves a lot of time if you can just use online tools. Some of the online tools that I use today weren't even available back when I started, but one is it's called ID.land or Land ID. It's awesome. I mean, it's a great mapping tool that shows you just all kinds of information. I won't say 100%, but like about as close as you can get to that virtually. Like you can see the topography lines, you can see if it's in a flood zone, you can see if there's wetlands on site, you can see where the local school zone district is, the zip code, like everything you would normally want to see is all there. And with tools like that, it just makes things way more feasible to do it virtually. So most of the properties I buy these days, I don't ever see them, and they're in states that maybe I've never been to, or if I have been there, it's been a long time. Like I don't need to be there. I can get what I need without leaving my computer. And most of the big time land investors I know are like that too. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let's talk about, you've got these motivated seller leads, the phone starts ringing or they keep texting or sending you emails, however you get the leads in. So let's walk us through your due diligence process. What happens once you get, a motivated seller on the line? What is your process of trying to do your due diligence and getting all the information, and from here to putting a contract on the home? How does that work?
Yep. Well, I've actually got a handful of blog posts I put together about this exact thing. So there's basically, some of this depends on the geographic area of where the land is. For example, in a place like Florida or Michigan or Washington State, or most places on the East Coast, a couple big things you'll want to watch out for is, first of all, wetlands. So are there any wetlands near this property? And it can be kind of tricky to do this because there is something called the National Wetlands Mapper that will show you where it thinks wetlands are, but it's not always accurate. But it's at least a place to start. And the reason wetlands are a problem is because in many cases, if there are wetlands on or anywhere near the property, it's a problem for you to be able to build anything because you can't disturb the wetland area. So if the wetlands do exist, you'll want to know about that beforehand. And it doesn't necessarily spell doom if they do, but you just want to know precisely where those wetlands are. Because if it's covering the whole property, then you really can't do anything with it. So there's that. There's things like, is it in a flood zone? There's questions like, is this thing buildable or not buildable? And that's kind of a loaded question because there's a lot of boxes that have to be checked to know for sure if a property is buildable. But there are things you can look at in terms of like what the zoning is, what the most likely use of the property is, just looking at the size of the property, looking at the topography of the property. So like the terrain and slope, like is it a super steep property or is it flat? All these things are really important clues to tell you the buildability of a property. And the reason that matters is because if it's not buildable, then the value just plummeted because you can't really use it or sell it to somebody who's going to use it for that. Perk tests are another big thing. In, again, the East Coast, just because in a perk test is all about measuring how quickly the water drains through the soil. And the reason that matters is because you need to know whether you can put a septic system there if there is no sewer. Because if you can't, and if there's no sewer, then again, you can't build on the property because you can't put a bathroom or a dwelling there. So a lot of these topics that you just want to know about, and when you get your first contact with the seller, you're just going through these list of things, asking them if they know the answers to these things. And you might ask them like, why are you selling? Like, tell me the story, just to figure out what their motivation is, a little bit of rapport building going on, that kind of thing. And you don't necessarily want to just blindly trust everything they tell you. And sometimes they just won't know all the answers. So, but it starts with this conversation just to figure out what you can establish and understand about it. And then I'm going on to something like Land ID to cross-check all the stuff and make sure that it lines up with what they told me. And, and the next step is to kind of figure out what we think the property is worth. And that's one of the trickier things in the land business, is because appraising houses is a fairly straightforward thing, because there are a lot of comps out there, lots of different ways you can look at a house to understand what it is most likely objectively worth. But land can be very different, especially if it's and this happens a lot actually, where you find a property where there are no comps anywhere. Like, there is no other similar property anywhere near it. It's one of a kind. And you may not know what you can build on it yet. Could be some ambiguity there. So, but basically, the best we can do is look at comparable properties, or at least the closest comparables we can find, and figure out what those have sold for on a per acre basis, and then sort of try to back into that with the property we're looking at. And whatever value we come up with, we got to understand that, like, it's ultimately kind of a ballpark value. We might be wrong on this because it's pretty hard to know with absolute certainty. And but once we get that number, say if we think it's, I don't know, $100,000 or something like that, then we want to figure out, okay, based on that price, what percentage of that value do we want to offer? Because as a land flipper, we need to buy this for a discounted price. That's how this whole business works. And when you're looking at a property of that price range, 100 grand, it starts to become more less about the percentage of what you're paying and more about, like, how many dollars of profit can I actually make here? Like, if I were to pay 60% of market value, $60,000, that would still be a $40,000 profit potentially. And if I'm confident about that, I mean, one could justify doing that. But it's kind of just up to that land investor to assess what's my comfort level. Like, how confident am I that I could, either improve this property beyond what it's currently worth, or sell it at whatever I think this value is. And I can say, when I'm just flipping a property and doing nothing to it, I'm usually more in that like 40% of market value range, or for $100,000 property, maybe 50 grand if I was really confident about it, just because I want to have a pretty healthy profit margin built in. Years ago, it would have been like 20 or 30% of market value. But yeah, that's the way that you just a quick back of the napkin way that you assess properties and make offers. So.
Yeah, it really depends on the market, that 20, yeah. 30, I was there too at one time, for sure, for sure.
Those were the days.
Yeah, exactly. You got to know the market. That's the really important thing. So let's talk about the seller. Like, once the seller is like, okay, that sounds great, I want to go ahead and, do that, write up the contract. You write up the contract. What is your exit strategy? Are you wholesaling? Are you taking title and then trying to find your buyers? Do you already have a buyer's list? What is your exit strategy once you got the home under contract and you've decided this is a deal, the seller is actually negotiated with you, and you've got a contract on the home? Walk us through that process.
Yeah. A lot of it depends on the market and like what the market will allow in terms of like, can you assign contracts here or not? Because some states don't really let you do that anymore. I think some of them might even have outlawed double closings, which is another exit strategy. The idea behind both of those is just that you don't have to have all the money because you're basically just flipping it to an end buyer like right at closing. So either you don't take title to it at all, or if you do, you're holding title for like 1 minute while the next buyer buys it from you. So that's one option. And those would sort of be used, say if, I don't know, say if the property, I just wasn't confident in it. I didn't want to have the risk of holding title to something when I didn't really know. And I wanted to basically just make sure I had that buyer lined up before I pulled any triggers. Or say if it was a situation where, it's worth 100 grand. I've got it under contract for 80 grand. I don't really want to put down 80 grand when I'm only making 20 grand, if that's just against my fundamentals. So I'll put it under contract for 80 grand with the understanding that my goal is to assign it or, do the double closing. So that's kind of why you would do that. Historically, though, what I've usually done is I've just taken title to it. And uh, I will say that's usually like the cleanest, simplest way to do it because like you don't have to explain any fancy things to the seller. You can kind of take your time to some degree. Like you don't have to race against the clock to make sure all this stuff is happening. Um, I mean, the downside though is, there's a little bit of risk in that and you could be owning the thing for a while. I think the longest I've ever held a property while trying to sell it was like 15 months. Usually they sell much faster than that, but it's kind of a, what the word is, maybe a hopeless feeling when you take a title to the property and you thought it was going to sell fast, but then it doesn't. And you just kind of sit there and wait. It's just like, oh, it's not a good feeling. So, yeah. So historically I've usually taken title to it. And when it's one of those situations where I could assign a double close when I felt it called for it, I would do that. So.
Okay, great. So you got it under contract, you're marketing it. How do you market to buyers? I know it depends on the market and you probably have repeat buyers if you work with investors, but let's walk us through a typical deal that you've got it under contract, you're ready to market. How do you market these land, that you have
Yep.
under your belt?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the value range of these properties or like how much money you're standing to make in the deal. So when I got started, I went after a lot of really cheap properties because that's all I had money for. And a lot of people get started this way actually because it's, I understand why. It's a less expensive way to test out the business. If you make mistakes, they don't cost you as much. So a lot of people naturally start with cheaper stuff. And when you're going after cheaper stuff, it's hard to get licensed land specialized real estate agents interested in that because they just don't stand to make much money on it. It's like not really worth their time. So what a lot of us end up doing, myself included, in the beginning is listing and selling them yourself on a website like Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, or you could pay to be a part of land.com. Or landsearch.com is a really great platform that's, I believe it's free to list still, last I checked. So yeah, if you're doing the cheap stuff, you can list it and sell it yourself. Or if you've got a VA, you could have them do that for you. And it's, it's kind of annoying. It's kind of a hassle. You got to stay on top of these listings and make sure they're current and respond to people. And but if you don't have the money and if you can't get a realtor involved, what else are you going to do? So that's one way to do it. But one advantage of moving to the bigger stuff is that you can start to find realtors, not just any house realtor, but one who specializes in vacant land. And they can be worth their weight in gold because not only can they list and sell the stuff for you and take basically half of that, the jobs off your plate because they're handling all the selling stuff now. And they'll charge usually a 6 to 10% commission on that for land. And it's totally worth it if you've got a good one. But they can also help you when you're going out and buying properties. You can ask them, hey, what do you think about this? Like, is this a good deal? Like, if I gave you this tomorrow, would you have a hard time selling it? You can just get a lot of helpful input from them. And yeah, so, and I guess that is another advantage if you're going after the bigger stuff. It also helps to kind of stay in one general area, like within a state or within a few different sections of a state. Because usually those realtors will sort of stick within one region of a state or maybe like a few different counties in a state. And if you're always doing stuff all over the place, then you have to start this search all over again every time, trying to find this amazing realtor. And sometimes they're really hard to find. So if you can find a good realtor, and if you're able to do repeat deals in that market, that's kind of like the golden ticket because you've got really good help and you can sustainably find deals.
Okay, great. So my next question is, how do you find that great realtor to work with? I mean, is it just a matter of just looking what they've got listed in the areas that you want to buy or you're doing business in already, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I actually, about a year ago, I went out of my way to try to start building a nationwide list of these agents. So everybody in the RE Tipster community, whenever they have a good experience with one, I'm like, hey, add them to this list. Tell us, their name, phone number, email, their website, what state, what counties they work in. Tell us all that. So we've got, 60 people there throughout the country. So it's definitely not everybody, but it's one place to start. You can sort them by state to try to find them that way. Just go to retipster.com/agents. if you want to see that. But if you don't have the benefit of that, or if you can't find one on that list that's in your area, I mean, really the way to start is to get onto Zillow or even land.com or LandWatch or something like that and look in the market where your properties are and find agents and look through their history to see, okay, how many land properties have they sold? Not houses, but land. Like, what's the ratio? Like, are most of them land or just a couple random lots in the past year or two? You want to find ones that have a proven track record of selling land, not just listing it, but selling it. And once you find these people, you can, it doesn't necessarily mean they're awesome, but there's a better chance that they might be, or they wouldn't be selling that much land. And then you can call them up and, have a conversation. And usually, like, my goal would be to call at least 3 of them just to see if I can, get a feel for who seems to be the most competent. There's also, different shops out there. Like, there's recland.net. There's a Pat Porter I know who runs that. So himself, and he's got a team of different land agents that work throughout several states in like Louisiana and Missouri. So like those can be really valuable too, because now you've got not just one agent who specializes in land, like that's literally what their whole business is based on, but they cover a bunch of states. So you can probably find some good help between one of them. So yeah, those are some ways to find it. And there's probably other ways too, but that's usually the way that I do it.
Okay, that's great. So, yeah, let's talk about your team here because we're talking about, how to find leads, how to put the contract together, your exit strategy, talking about, finding a good agent who's part of piece of your team. Who else is on your team? To be a successful land investor like you, Seth?
Yeah.
What other members do you have on your team?
Yeah, it kind of depends on, like, again, what volume you're doing and like how big these deals are and how much time it takes to find these deals and sell them. So I try to keep my team as small as possible these days, partially because like I'm not an awesome team builder or leader of people. I've just realized that over the years, that's just not my strength. So the people that are on my team, they're not like W-2 people. It's like agents, title companies, attorneys, like people that I can tap on the shoulder when I need them, but I don't have to like pay them all the time just to keep their help. I also don't do a whole lot of like texting myself, that like the type of marketing that requires a lot of human capital to do it. Part of that is a function of the types of properties I'm looking for. They don't require that. But if I did, I'd probably hire somebody like that. It also helps to partner with people. So I've been partnering a lot this year, more than I ever have before. And I'm realizing what I've missed out on over all these years. Because I had some bad partnership experiences about 10 or 12 years ago, and it kind of just soured me to it. And I guess I got a little bit lazy in my thinking. I just figured, well, it went bad back then. I'm done. I'm never going to do that again. But I've realized after being put into some situations where like it made a lot of sense to have partners and it went really well, I'm realizing like, man, there's so much more I can do in life if I partner with people that are really good at the stuff I'm not good at. And I know like it can be totally hard to find these people, and it's kind of a risk when you get into bed with somebody, you don't really know if they're going to follow through. But man, once you do, it's an amazing thing. So this past year, I've been partnering in the fact that like I've been funding deals for people, and I've this is not land related, but the self-storage facility that I built, like I have a partner who manages that thing full time, so I don't have to think about any of that stuff. And it's just awesome. It's great to have good, competent people to handle those things for you.
Yeah, that's great. So you're talking about partners and all that, because my other question was about funding in terms of funding your deals. Do you self-fund? Do you do owner financing? Do you work with private lenders? How do you get funding for your deals, or does it depend on the deal?
Yeah. Yeah, it really just depends. It depends on the deal. So, for example, if I was going after a deal that was, I don't know, 50 to 100 grand, like I would just cover that for myself if I was going to take title to it. If I was going after one that was like 500,000 or more, like I would go to a funder. So like there are situations where I would fund somebody else's deal or fund my own deal or get somebody else to fund my deal. Kind of just depends on how big it is and what we're trying to do, and if I'm able to find that other party that I need in the mix.
Okay, great, great, great. Well, we're coming to the end, pretty much almost to the end. I just have a couple more questions.
Yeah.
One of my questions is for people just kind of starting out, what would be your advice for people who kind of want to get into this business, learn about this business? Should they just kind of go out there? I know you are a virtual investor. Do you think people should start out locally or yeah, because I've had people who's like, I cannot find anything in my area. I want to do things virtually. Rachel, what do you think of that? What are your thoughts on some of these things that people who want to get started, they're kind of their concerns? What would be your advice to people like this?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of good free education out there now about the land business. I used to be one of like four people in the world talking about this, and now there's like I think like well over 30 people now teaching in various forms, and a lot of them are saying a lot of good stuff. So I can tell you just in terms of what I can offer. I mean, retipster.com has a ton of information and a really good search functionality if you're interested in something specific, like what does it cost to get into the land business? Or how do I start finding these motivated sellers? Or what due diligence do I need? Like you can search for any of that stuff. We've got a forum as well. There is a blog post I put together a couple of years ago. It's basically like a little course and a blog post. You can find it at landflippinglifecycle.com. And that'll forward you to the blog post, but kind of just goes step by step through the process of how to get started with this. It links to a lot of other videos throughout the site explaining step by step how to do this. And yeah, I would just start, digging into the education out there. Again, RE Tipster has a lot of that. You can find us at retipster.com or go to YouTube and look for RE Tipster, and you'll find a lot of that stuff there.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was my leading into my next question in terms of resources and what you can provide. I know you have the website, you have the podcast. Can you talk about a little bit about what other things you offer on retipster.com that, people can get started on? If they read everything, they listen to the podcast. What other resources do you offer? Training on your website?
Yeah. Well, the kind of the flagship course that I've had out there for a number of years now is landinvestingmasterclass.com. That's where you can find it. And it's basically like a start to finish, A to Z. Like if you want to dive in, you're ready to go, and you don't want to like search all over the place to try to piecemeal find answers on how to do things. It'll just take you from start to finish. Like here's step one. Here's how you get started. Here's how you set things up. Here's how you get your list. Here's how you sort it. Here's how you send out mail. If you want to do texting, here's how you do that. When they call, here's what you say. Just everything you need to know. So that's there. I've got also like a beginner's version of that. Like it's just very basic kindergarten level land stuff. It's landinvestingfoundations.com. And really, if you go to retipster.com/store, that's where you'll find all the different courses and stuff that, some of it may appeal to you, some of it might not, but at least you'll see everything we have right there.
Okay, great. And lastly, I just wanted to see what is the best way people can reach you. I know you have the podcast, you have the website. Are there other ways that people can reach you online?
Yeah. So if you go to retipster.com and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's a tiny little footer thing where you'll see the word contact. And if you click contact, you'll see a way that you could send me a message. Or if you're on any social media platform, you can search for RE Tipster, and that's where you'll find various RE Tipster related social media channels too. And I usually respond through those as well.
Sounds great, Seth. And my last question is, what types of words of advice, wisdom, inspiration do you have for people who kind of are just starting out, kind of like you, back then? What kind of words of advice do you have for them?
Yeah. I mean, I almost say this to myself as much as I say it to anyone else, and that is to just start moving and start breaking things. Like just a lot of the people I know who have gotten really far in life, that's kind of the mentality they took. Like not forever, but like to get started, like just get momentum going. Like just start doing it. It doesn't matter if you do it right or not. I mean, you'll probably do it wrong, frankly, but like that's the best way to learn. It's one thing for me to sit here and tell you what to do, but like once you start doing it and you start experiencing firsthand, oh, I don't like that. I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to do it this way instead. Like that's when it really starts sticking. And honestly, like most people have a really hard time with that, whether they're able to admit that or not. It's hard to get uncomfortable and get out there and start moving. But man, if you can, like that's really what separates the people who get somewhere from people who just kind of dream about it all day long.
That's great. Great advice, y'all. Nothing beats taking action.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Seth. I really appreciate it. If y'all have any questions for Seth, I will put all of the links here at the end of this post for this podcast. Definitely check him out, retipster.com. He's a really good writer and also podcaster. So without further ado, thank you so much, Seth. I really appreciate it. This is Rachel Hernandez, aka Mobile Home Girl with adventuresinmobilehomes.com, signing off. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.